What are we covering in the last 24 hours on the Israel-Hamas War, day 128? For 4 months in captivity, the Israeli military and security forces managed to rescue 2 Israeli hostages today, Fernando Simon Marman and Luis Har, aged 70 and 60, who were held in an apartment in the most southern town of Rafah. al-Qassam Brigades, that is the military wing of Hamas, stated today that 2 Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip were killed throughout the day as a result of IDF bombings. Mr. Netanyahu stated today that the areas above Rafah have been cleared and that civilian population will be directed to those areas. The Palestinian Authority reportedly planning a new unity government with Hamas in the day after the war. Hello. I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here to bring you these updates in the last 24 hours on the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of February 11th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 12th, 2024 in the Middle East. I will note that if you want to know when these updates are released, if you're subscribed to the channel, make sure that you hit notifications. That way you will get a notice every time a new update is released on YouTube. Starting with the hostage situation, after 4 months in captivity, the Israeli military and security forces managed to rescue 2 Israeli hostages today, Fernando Simon Marman and Luis Har, aged 70 and 60, who were held in an apartment in the most southern town of Rafah. The forces reportedly arrived clandestinely and burst into the building, with substantial air cover and gun battles that ensued from neighboring buildings. Hamas's Shabora battalion was also attacked simultaneously from the air in order to provide cover. 1 soldier was reportedly lightly injured in the operation. Both hostages were rescued and are reportedly in good physical condition. 134 hostages remain in the Gaza Strip. This includes at least 31 hostages that are confirmed dead by the IDF, and some reports suggest that at least 20 more are also likely dead. Related to this, the al-Qassam Brigades, that is the military wing of Hamas, stated today that 2 Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip were killed throughout the day as a result of IDF bombings, and in those same bombings, 8 more were injured. While there is no evidence given by the al-Qassam Brigades, it is noteworthy that they have stated these types of things in the past, and at least in some of the cases, they were proven true, as in the case of Yossi Sharabi that was reported several days ago. Other news related to the hostages. CIA Director William Barnes is due to arrive in Cairo on Tuesday to try to resume the negotiations between the sides. In a conversation today between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Biden urged Netanyahu to let Israel send a delegation to the negotiations, even if Netanyahu, quote, does not see where the talks are headed. In Israel, the war cabinet is reportedly split on what to do. Ministers Gantz and Eisenkot want Israel to at least send an official response in writing stating what are Israel's terms for negotiations, while Netanyahu wants to still approve this with the expanded cabinet, and is being criticized by the other ministers in the war cabinet that this is just a stalling tactic. As a reminder, Israel's terms to return to negotiations include 3 things. One is adhering to the issues from the Paris summit, i.e. Israel does not want to debate the issues that Hamas included in their response, like Jews entering Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif, or the conditions of Palestinian prisoners. 2, agreeing on the formula of Palestinian prisoners in advance, i.e. how many Palestinian prisoners are going to be released for each hostage in advance. And 3, Israel's not willing to release any of the quote-unquote heavy Palestinian prisoners, those are in prison for life or who are leaders of different terror organizations, until the final phases of the negotiations. I will add that at this point it appears very likely that Israel will send delegates to the negotiations in Cairo, even if it is unclear what exactly is going to be negotiated at this point. Related to this, the Wall Street Journal reported today that Egypt conveyed messages to Hamas that Hamas has 2 weeks to reach a deal with Israel, otherwise the IDF is going to carry out its plans for its invasion into the town of Rafah. I'll say more about this later. Earlier in the day, Hamas's al-Aqsa news agency quoted senior officials that stated in relation to this that if the IDF invades Rafah, this will cause the negotiations to explode and completely break down. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars sent from the Gaza Strip towards Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF has reportedly pulled its forces out of the el-Halwa and Rimal areas of Gaza City after completing substantial raids in the area. In the last several weeks, the IDF has begun more targeted raids in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. These have included primarily in the al-Shati refugee camp. However, there's been activity reported also in Rimal, Tel el-Halwa, Jabalia refugee camp, Sajaiya, and other areas like Zaytun. Reportedly, the IDF has pulled out of these 2 areas. According to Palestinian reports on the ground, once the IDF has pulled out, substantial devastation is seen in the neighborhoods, and over 100 bodies have been discovered of Palestinians that died in the fighting during the IDF activity in those areas. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there was a reported attempted assassination of the IDF in the el-Nusseirat refugee camp. A car was hit by missiles and destroyed near the Arama mosque. There were reportedly no casualties. It is unclear who the target of that assassination attempt was. Other activities in the central parts of the Gaza Strip include ambushes of Hamas operatives that were shooting anti-tank missiles at IDF soldiers, and they were reportedly attacked and killed from the air and with a ground assault. Other attacks in the area were reported against different weapons warehouses, with substantial secondary blasts confirming how many weapons were actually stored in those different areas. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, where the bulk of the fighting is, in Khan Yunis, in the western parts of the city, were substantial gun battles reported throughout the day, including many face-to-face encounters. These were reported both by the IDF and the different Hamas brigades. Air units reportedly targeted Hamas operatives that were loading a motorbike with explosives, and the attack also caused substantial secondary explosions. The IDF reported in a summary that in the past week, over 100 terrorists have been killed in the western parts of Khan Yunis. In addition, there's also reportedly intensifying activity in the heart of the city. The IDF is reportedly raiding sites and buildings of Hamas, and that it was using for staging grounds and weapon storages. Many of these have reportedly been booby-trapped by Hamas, and thus the IDF is entering only after engineering units get to the area, and that is one of the reasons that it is progressing relatively slowly. In the most southern town of Rafah, there were substantial bombings reported throughout the night. Many of these are associated with that rescue operation that I mentioned at the beginning. According to reports, during the operation, substantial air cover was given in order to allow the IDF forces to retreat from the city. Hamas claimed that 14 structures and 3 mosques were attacked. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that at least 52 Palestinians, including Hamas operatives and civilians, were killed in these attacks. Other news related to the Gaza Strip: there were continuous reports today and statements made regarding the IDF's planned intentions to invade the most southern city of Rafah. Prime Minister Netanyahu today gave first reference in interviews that he gave to press outlets in the United States regarding Israel's plans for civilians in the town of Rafah. I'll remind everyone that right now in the town of Rafah, that is roughly 25 square miles, there are upwards of 1.5 million Palestinians that have become internally displaced from the Gaza Strip, and there are several other 100,000 in the northern parts of Rafah in the al-Muasi area. In interviews given to ABC and Fox, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated today that the areas above Rafah have been cleared and that civilian population will be directed to those areas. He added in those interviews that there is no other army in the world who takes precautions to avoid civilian casualties as much as the IDF does, and stated, and I quote, "Those who tell us not to enter Rafah are basically telling us to leave Hamas there and to lose the war." So it's important to note that while Netanyahu says that Israel is going to call on Palestinian civilians to go to the areas north of Rafah, it is unclear at this point if he's referring to the al-Muasi refugee camp, which is already vastly overcrowded with Palestinian internally displaced civilians, or if he's referring more to the areas in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. It is unlikely that the IDF will allow people to return to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. This means they have to pass through the Deir al-Balach areas where there's ongoing fighting right now. Speaking to President Biden today, Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly stated similar things. He responded to Biden's concerns about the Rafah operation by stating that just as Israel has operated throughout the entire war in accordance with international law and the highest standards, it will do so in the next phases. Reuters reported that in the conversation between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden, Biden's comments that the IDF has gone over the top in the Gaza Strip was not mentioned. Other reports are also suggesting that the IDF may be planning to direct civilians instead of to the north back to Khan Yunis as the IDF moves from Khan Yunis to Rafah. Either way, such an endeavor is going to take a substantial amount of time and logistical coordination. Egypt is continuously warning about the impeding operation in Rafah, again stating that it may suspend its peace treaty with Israel if the Rafah invasion leads Palestinians into Sinai, also stating that if Israel pours too many forces into the city, it will be in violation of the peace treaty. Other news in the Gaza Strip: the IDF Arabic spokesperson published pictures today that were found on a computer in the northern Hamas base. The pictures show Al Jazeera reporter Muhammad Samir training with Hamas anti-tank units, and other documents also show that he was working in the research and development section of the organization while he was acting as a reporter for Al Jazeera. The IDF has stated many times that when there are reports that the IDF has killed journalists, in fact they are fighting for Hamas, and the IDF spokesperson in Arabic made a point of publishing these two pictures side by side. Regarding casualties, 2 IDF soldiers were reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 229. 7 IDF soldiers reported injured in the last 24 hours. Total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began, 1,326. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting 112 Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 28,176. 67,784 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. I will add that the figures, both from the IDF and the Palestinian Health Ministry, do not include the operation that was in Rafah, the rescue operation, both the Palestinians who were killed and IDF soldiers who were reportedly injured. Those numbers will be added to the tally tomorrow. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, in the conversation today between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the U.S. President reportedly asked Netanyahu to ensure that the maximum quota of aid trucks that Israel allows into the Gaza Strip, that is 200 per day, is in fact reached. This is associated with the ongoing protests in Kerem Shalom and concerns about the fact that those protests are in fact blocking a large number of aid trucks from entering the Gaza Strip. Today it was also reported that in Israel there's growing concern that Egypt may begin to allow aid to enter the Gaza Strip without passing through Israel for inspection as a result of the decreased volume of aid trucks that are actually entering. There were also reports of protests in Kerem Shalom crossing today, and again today there was no report how many aid trucks did actually manage to enter the Gaza Strip. Moving on to the West Bank, there were 2 attempted stabbing attacks carried out by Palestinians throughout the day. In the Old City of Jerusalem, a Palestinian attempted to stab border police officers at the Lions Gate. He was shot and killed. A bystander was later injured from the shooting. There was also an attempted Palestinian attack near the village of Husan in Bethlehem. Reportedly, a Palestinian attempted to stab soldiers who were securing the road in the area. He was also shot and killed. In addition to this, Israeli settler attacks were reported throughout the day, specifically near the Bazaria junction in the vicinity of the Chomesh settlement. Palestinians reportedly gathered and threw stones at cars and in the vicinity. In one instance, a driver of the cars was pulled out of his car. He was sprayed with pepper spray and his windshield was shattered by the attackers. Regarding IDF activity, there was a substantial IDF activity reported in the Beit Omar area. Reportedly, there was a 12-hour operation that included uncovering weaponry and questioning dozens of Palestinians. 8 Palestinians were arrested in this operation. Other activity was also reported in Bethlehem and in Hajjah near Kalkilia. A total of 14 Palestinians were reported arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were continuous rockets and missiles sent from Lebanon towards the northern parts of Israel, although substantially less than the major barrages in the last several days. Rockets targeted the areas of Iftach. There were also mortars sent towards several different IDF outposts, and there was an anti-tank missile that was targeted towards Kibbutz Menara, and it managed to hit a house. Regarding IDF activity, the IDF carried out attacks against Hezbollah launching sites, military outposts, and military structures, as well as different terror infrastructures in the villages of Ramia, Yarun, and Zichin. There was also reported IDF fire against a suspicious target in the Kila village, and there was an interception of a target above the skies of Lebanon. It was not reported what that target was. Al-Manar also reported that the IDF carried out attacks in the areas of Hula, and artillery fire was also noted in the Shuba village. Moving on to some of the regional developments, in Yemen, the United States reported attacking 2 uncrewed ships and 3 nautical cruise missiles in the Hudaydah port, noting that they were threatening U.S. activity in the area. In addition, UKMTO reported just an hour before recording this an incident in the Red Sea south of the Moha port. No details were given what this incident was. Usually when an incident is reported, it means that a ship has signaled distress. This is often as a result of a missile that was launched towards the ship. We will probably find out more about this tomorrow. Moving on to some of the political and general trends of the last 24 hours. Francesca Albanese, who's a special UN envoy on human rights in the Palestinian territories, stated today, and I quote, "The victims of October 7th were not killed because of their Judaism, but in response to Israel's oppression." She later put out a clarifying tweet stating that she does in fact reject all racism and anti-Semitism and is not justifying the attack, but that the true reason for what happened is not anti-Semitism, but rather Israeli oppression. The Israeli foreign minister called on the UN Secretary General to fire her immediately. Other political news, the Iranian foreign minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian arrived in Damascus today after holding meetings yesterday in Lebanon with the Lebanese prime minister, the foreign minister, as well as Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Other political news, the Palestinian Authority announced appointing a new leadership for the internal security organization that is the equivalent of the Palestinian Authority of the Israeli Shabak or the FBI in the United States. General Suleiman Abu Mahmid will lead the organization from now on, and his deputy will be Colonel Iyad al-Akra. Reports were stated that this is part of the Palestinian Authority starting to adhere to the reforms that the United States is demanding that the Palestinian Authority makes, while PA sources were quoted in Israel's Haaretz news outlet stating that the breadth and depth of reform that will be carried out will be contingent on how the United States and Israel strengthen the Palestinian Authority, specifically noting transferring tax money that is owed, and clarifying the day-after plans in the Gaza Strip. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas is currently visiting Qatar. The Saudi Al-Sharak news network reported that during his visit, Abbas is going to present Hamas via negotiators a plan to develop a technocratic unity government. The news site adds that Hamas welcomes this prospect with regards to rebuilding the Gaza Strip, but adds that there needs to be room for mutual understandings about the identity of the government officials and who is going to oversee the reconstruction in the Gaza Strip. Other reports suggested that Muhammad Mustafa, who's a former Palestinian Authority deputy prime minister, and a current member of the PLO's executive committee, is favored by Abbas to be the prime minister of this future technocratic government. Other news related to the Gaza Strip: visiting an Israeli base today, Prime Minister Netanyahu again stated, and I quote, "We want to bring about the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. That requires our security control and responsibility over the entire territory west of the Jordan River, including the Gaza Strip. There is no substitute for this in the foreseeable future. I say the same thing to the international community, to the US President, and to other leaders. We will always have security control, and if this requires presence on the ground, then there will be presence on the ground. If this means the IDF enters somewhere, just as the IDF can get anywhere at any time today, that will be preserved." He added that there is increased international pressure that needs to be withheld, and that he is doing so. This is likely associated to what was reported several days ago after the visit of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, when he stated that in his assessment Netanyahu is actually looking for a collision with the United States on the matter of the future of the Gaza Strip, because this helps him strengthen his political base in Israel, showing that he is the one who is going to withstand US pressure. Related to this, Washington Post today reported that there is a growing rift between President Biden and his aides on the one hand, and Prime Minister Netanyahu on the other, and that this is right now at its greatest point and possibly its breaking point. The article stated that the Biden administration is coming close to the point of no longer seeing Netanyahu as a partner, adding that they no longer see Netanyahu as someone you can work with, or even that you can convince in private meetings. The paper cites a list of times Netanyahu has rejected the United States' basic requests and also embarrassed the US administration, specifically noting the repeated statements about how the IDF is going to invade Rafah, despite the fact that the United States keeps on saying that they do not support this at the present time. If you enjoy these reports, please do remember to give a like to the videos and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I promise to answer each and every one. That is the report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.